This is Audible. From the series and Volume 1 of The Unseen City, Salazar's Touch. The City's Fox. By Kevin B. Vincent stared at the bankroll before him. The four kings had ruled Ottawa from the shadows for years. The city pulsed with its usual rhythm, commuters rushing for the bus at Dalhousie and Rideau, most clutching a Tim Hortons cup or some other hot beverage. So ingrained was the routine that even in the heat of summer, the lineup at Tim Hortons would pile up at least 3 times during a business day. Ottawa was a city of habits. With most of its population working government jobs, life followed an expected cycle, a repetition of events yielding the same predictable outcomes. But, as with every city upheld by structure and a reputation for safety, there existed another world beneath the surface. The shadow ecosystem, home to the unseen, the night dwellers, those who thrived in the dark and preferred to remain there. Ottawa's underworld operated like a well-structured pyramid scheme, with one key distinction: the direction of the money. Bound by archaic laws, Salazar's laws, that outlawed most gang activity, a decision had been made long ago. Only a select few would control the city's most profitable illicit industries: drugs, prostitution, fraud, and scamming. These vices persisted, but centralized control prevented a chaotic influx of rival gangs. These select few were the Four Kings, each reigning over a particular domain, with Vincent at the helm. Every final call rested with him. The Four Kings gathered every Sunday night at the Lux coffee shop and bar. Located on the corner of Wellington Street, the venue's interior managed to exude both professionalism and a sense of casual relaxation. The official owner was an ambitious Asian entrepreneur, embodying the spirit of a true hustler. Yet it was well understood that Vincent had a significant, albeit mostly ignored, stake in the establishment. He simply liked the coffee shop and made it his meeting ground. The Black Rover pulled up first. A muscular, blonde-haired man stepped out. Igor, the Russian, one of the city's kings, the architect behind Ottawa's drug trade. Every dark alley exchange and backseat transaction bore his imprint. Yet Vincent's carefully crafted system ensured nothing could be traced back to either of them. Igor had been a crack addict at 15, failed by every intervention the city's welfare system had attempted. To sustain his expensive habit, he turned to selling. By 25, still heavily addicted, he found himself in the midst of a 4-on-1 brawl at the Mansion Club on Dalhousie, now renamed Palace. 3 bouncers and a loudmouth Somali university student attempted to subdue him. The student, eager to prove himself, was swiftly knocked unconscious. The bouncers soon followed. Vincent, fresh from a private haircut at the Haitian barber across the street, took notice. Under his tutelage, Igor was molded into the group's enforcer. He ruled his underlings through fear, which only deepened when he purchased a pig farm on the outskirts of the city. It was rumored that more than a few unfortunate souls had been fed to the pigs. His drug empire ran smoothly, until it didn't. Igor once tied a dealer to a metal chair, carving him up with a chainsaw, until he confessed to theft. Later, he lamented that the young man hadn't survived. Proof of his wrath was easier to instill when the lesson remained visible. The Red Rover arrived next. Matthew McConnell stepped out, a tall, impeccably dressed Latino, exuding the air of a respectable real estate agent. But beneath the polished exterior lurked the man who ran Ottawa's underground sex trade. His control extended across the city, save for Hull and Gatineau. territory firmly under Hell's Angels' rule. Unlike the Four Kings, the bikers spent much of their time evading law enforcement. Matthew, on the other hand, operated seamlessly. He owned most of Ottawa's motels, where prostitutes and pimps paid weekly fees for space and security. His descent into the trade began early. Raised in the slums of Vanier, he lived in a cramped basement apartment with heroin-addicted parents. Rent was a constant struggle, and from the ages of 13 to 16, Matthew was sent upstairs to service the landlady, an arrangement ensuring his family's continued tenancy. He had been conditioned to believe this was normal, a responsibility of manhood. By 16, he understood the truth and fled to the streets, where he survived until he met Vincent. Vincent had an eye for potential. He took Matthew under his wing, cleaned him up, gave him purpose. Now, Matthew commanded an empire. If a girl under his charge stepped out of line, he beat her senseless while others watched. By morning, he played the role of caretaker, arranging for medical attention, a spa day, or a hair appointment. This psychological manipulation left his victims in a perpetual state of Stockholm Syndrome. Like the others, Matthew had a carefully curated public life. Family meant discipline. All the kings, save for Igor, had wives and children. The third arrival was in a green rover. Rajesh the Indian stepped out, a prodigious scammer. His intellect was unrivaled. At 17, he conned Ottawa's largest hotel out of $1 million. The scandal made headlines, but before authorities could act, Rajesh vanished. The media moved on. Vincent had orchestrated his escape and helped him build an empire. By 21, Rajesh controlled one of North America's largest fraud syndicates. Over 130 employees staffed his call center on Slater Street, officially registered as a research and survey firm. In 3 years, he funneled $147 million into their network. With his first real profits, he purchased a crematorium, an invaluable asset for the kings, eliminating evidence when needed. To Rajesh, Vincent was more than a benefactor. He was a god. The final vehicle was the least conspicuous, an old 2001 black Toyota Corolla. A tall, muscular black man emerged, clad in joggers and a worn cotton t-shirt. He could have passed for a gardener. In truth, Vincent Azikiwe was the king of kings. Born in Nigeria, Vincent's influence extended far beyond Ottawa. He was both a teacher and foot soldier for the left, an international crime syndicate that abducted and trained children from the most powerful bloodlines in history. Descendants of Alexander the Great, Cleopatra, Charlemagne, Genghis Khan, and Haile Selassie were among those raised in a secret manner on the outskirts of Ottawa. There, they were educated in warfare, espionage, and psychological manipulation to serve the exclusive clientele of the left. Vincent was one of them, a lost descendant of Nnamdi Azikiwe, Nigeria's first president. Unlike his peers, he chose to remain in Ottawa. Though the manor had trained him to be a ruthless operative, he found solace in gardening. If he wasn't tending to the grounds, he was shaping the next generation of killers, teaching them the art of psychological warfare. Violence is a tool, he often told them, but breaking someone's will is more efficient. To the other kings, Vincent's power remained an enigma. He dressed simply, lived humbly, and yet commanded absolute control. Igor, the latest to question his authority, believed Vincent was too lenient, taking only 40% of their earnings. If the roles were reversed, Igor reasoned, he would demand 60%, a growing resentment that gnawed at his loyalty. Vincent entered the coffee shop. Students typed away on laptops. patrons sipped their drinks, and in the far left corner, his proteges awaited. Despite his wealth and influence, Vincent remained unchanged. He loathed clubs, preferring the serenity of a coffee shop. Business was business, and every Sunday the Kings met at Lux Coffee on Wellington Street. Igor, Matthew, and Rajesh sat at a coffee table in the corner, patiently waiting for Vincent. Rajesh typed away on his laptop. Matthew was engaged in a phone call, while Igor observed them both pensively. Vincent had always held a special fondness for Rajesh, particularly because of the help Rajesh had given him in his younger years. Rajesh, in turn, looked at Vincent with an almost reverential admiration. Vincent appreciated Matthew's ruthless determination, his relentless drive to protect what was his at all costs. Matthew would do whatever it took to keep his business afloat, and Vincent recognized in him a certain savagery that made him a perfect ally. Vincent first encountered Igor during a drug deal gone wrong. Watching from a distance, he saw Igor single-handedly take down 4 men. What stood out to Vincent, however, wasn't just Igor's ability to fight, but the calculated way he incapacitated each opponent, breaking their knees one by one before calmly walking away, as if nothing had happened. The drug trade was brutal and unforgiving, and Vincent required men with little to no empathy, ones who wouldn't hesitate when necessary. The typical street-level enforcers lacked the kind of ruthless efficiency he needed. "Hey, boss," Rajesh greeted as Vincent arrived. Matthew ended his call, placing his phone on the table, while Igor acknowledged Vincent only with a sly smile, offering no verbal greeting. "Vincent! Welcome!" Matthew, seemingly lost in his own world, greeted Vincent with exaggerated enthusiasm. Vincent simply nodded at them as he took his seat. Igor pulled out a small vial of powder, tapped a bit onto his thumbnail, and sniffed it, while the others watched him indifferently. "You're late, Vincent," Igor remarked, deliberately adding a hint of resentment to his tone, making it clear he wanted Vincent's full attention. Rajesh and Matthew exchanged glances, recognizing the shift in energy. "Yes, by a few minutes. My apologies," Vincent replied with a calm smile. "I've been wanting to talk to you." Igor took a swig from a silver flask, his heart pounding slightly. Like the others, he was wary of Vincent's composed demeanor, his soft voice, and the ever-present smile that only the truly powerful could maintain. Vincent was feared, but Igor had never seen him display the wrath he was so notorious for. Fear was Igor's currency, and he struggled with the idea of answering to a man whose power he had yet to witness firsthand. Vincent watched as Igor gathered his nerve. Finally, Igor leaned back in his chair and, with forced boldness, spoke words that would put him at odds with both his benefactor and his fellow kings. "Vincent, I won't be able to make this year's payment. A few shipments got seized at the border, and business has been slow." The weight of his words settled over the table. Rajesh and Matthew avoided Vincent's gaze, knowing full well the implications. This wasn't just a financial issue, it was a challenge to Vincent's authority. Each king operated his own empire, pulling in millions annually. The rules were clear. Once a year, at a time of Vincent's choosing, Matthew, Rajesh, and Igor were each expected to present $3 million. Vincent took $1 million per king for himself, while the remaining funds were funneled into an enigmatic organization known only as the Left. The very existence of this shadowy group irritated Igor. He was willing to give Vincent his share out of respect, but the thought of faceless men enjoying his money enraged him. Worse still, he suspected that Vincent was pocketing the entire sum, and the Left was nothing more than a well-crafted illusion. Vincent offered a knowing smile but said nothing. Let them stew. He flicked his napkin onto his plate and slowly pushed back his chair. The silence unsettled Igor. Matthew and Rajesh stared at him, concerned, yet unimpressed. "Vincent, did you hear me? Are we cool? Give me 2, maybe 3 months, and I'll have your money." Igor's voice betrayed his need to break the unbearable quiet. Vincent finally leaned forward, locking eyes with Igor. "Igor, that's unacceptable. The shipments you lost were meant to be confiscated, so they have no real impact on your earnings. More importantly, I reviewed the numbers yesterday. You've pulled in roughly 7 million this year, and we still have months to go. I know the numbers, Igor. You should know by now. I know everything." "But Vincent, the thing is—" Vincent raised a single finger, silencing him instantly. "No buts, Igor. Listen carefully. Pay your dues as if your life depends on it. Respect the left, and you'll always be protected. You have 2 days. After that, deal with the consequences." Vincent leaned back, watching as Igor clenched his jaw, struggling to mask his frustration. With that matter settled, Vincent turned his attention to business. "So, Rajesh, what's on the table today? Let's get this meeting started." Rajesh launched into a 10-minute breakdown of the profits from their various enterprises, detailing issues and planned resolutions. As always, Vincent listened, taking notes. Afterward, he would make a few calls, and the problems mentioned would simply vanish. That was why they relied on him. Despite years of operations, none of them had ever spent a night in jail or even faced interrogation. Vincent was their shield. When the meeting concluded, Vincent, Matthew, and Rajesh stepped outside as boxes of cash were discreetly transferred between vehicles. Vincent didn't bother counting. He knew Matthew and Rajesh wouldn't shortchange him. Vincent left LUX as unceremoniously as he had arrived, leaving the kings to themselves. Matthew returned to the table with Rajesh, a confident spring in his step. The boss was gone, and for now, he was back to being one of the only bosses in the room. "Igor, that was foolish," Matthew said, shaking his head. "You know damn well you can afford the fee." "You're all fools," Igor spat. "We pay, yet we don't know where the money goes. I'm done being controlled by some skinny, unfashionable nobody." Rajesh smirked, but said nothing, eyes fixed on his laptop. "Igor, listen," Matthew sighed. "You have no idea what you're up against. Trust me, that's one tree you don't want to shake. You won't like what falls." "Shut up, you weaklings. Both of you are sheep. But don't worry, I'll replace Vincent. I'm tired of him bleeding us dry under the guise of some fictional organization." Igor leaned in conspiratorially. "I just need 2 guys from each of you. I already have 3 of my own. Tonight, I'll take the money to Vincent's house. By tomorrow, I'll be in charge. You won't have to pay nearly as much." Matthew and Rajesh exchanged glances before Rajesh finally spoke, while packing up his laptop. "Igor, out of respect, I won't tell Vincent what you just said. But I'll give you the same advice. Don't do it. It's not worth it. That said, if you succeed, we'll happily pay less." "So you won't help, but you won't stop me?" Igor asked, satisfied. "Nope, it's your plan. Use your own men," Rajesh replied. "Same here," Matthew added with a smirk. "Good luck. Though, by your own logic, you should be able to take down a skinny, unfashionable nobody with ease." Igor scoffed, storming off, but paused at the exit, grinning. "Who knows? Maybe the fees will double." Matthew chuckled. Should we have warned him? No, Rajesh replied. Vincent wouldn't want us to. He's making his bed, Matthew muttered. Let's see how he sleeps in it. No, don't worry. I doubt he'll succeed. Remember, we all thought we had Vincent in our grasp once, but he always turned the tables in the worst possible ways. Igor is in for the shock of his life if Vincent is expecting him. Rajesh concluded, standing beside his car with his hand on the driver's door. The two men exchanged farewells before departing from the LUX coffee shop parking lot, each anticipating what the next day would bring. Later that afternoon, Vincent drove down Dwyer Hill Road, heading toward his workplace and first real home, a vast estate concealed deep in the outskirts of Ottawa. The property was intentionally surrounded by acres of dense forest, accessible only by a small, winding two-way street leading from Dwyer Hill Road to the estate's towering gates. The gates were dark and designed to appear rusted, standing roughly 3 to 4 meters high and spanning the width of 4 cars. A work of art in their own right, they were a miniature replica of the Palace of Versailles. Gates during King Louis XVI's reign. The gates had been a gift from the Napoleonic lineage when the left decided to take in one of their wayward descendants, then just a toddler, an addition that later brought a wealth of donations to the organization. Vincent followed the long driveway, its surface covered in smooth river stones, flanked on both sides by perfectly aligned guava trees. The estate itself was a masterpiece, with well-manicured hedges and sprawling gardens, tended by Vincent himself. The mansion stood at the heart of the property. It boasted 3 floors, 16 full bedrooms, 3 training grounds, and several rooms repurposed as classrooms. The building was grand, supported by massive gray pillars that rose above a broad staircase, separating the driveway from the expansive front porch. By day, Vincent was an educator, one of the figures of authority overseeing the bright and sometimes dangerously gifted minds privileged enough to be taught within those walls. But his true passion was botany. He spent hours, sometimes weeks, immersed in caring for his plants. He had no interest in wealth, having secured financial stability years ago through an intricate web of illicit enterprises and business ventures throughout the city. Vincent had been brought to the left as an orphan at the age of 3, a child from Nigeria, with no sponsors or inherited wealth, yet still accepted into the organization. He knew what it was like to be without a home. 30 years ago, he had arrived in Canada with nothing. If not for Salazar, he would have remained on the streets. At the time, he had no idea that Salazar was the mastermind behind the world's largest criminal operation. Though he was a direct descendant of Nnamdi Azikiwe, Nigeria's first president, that lineage meant little in comparison to his peers, descendants of Queen Cleopatra, Genghis Khan, and Napoleon, among others, who had the financial backing of powerful secret donors. Despite being a prince among princes, Vincent had always been the runt of the litter, while his peers left Ottawa to operate in the shadows, toppling governments, manipulating corporations, and bankrolling oil tycoons. Vincent chose to stay behind, focusing on his plants. They mocked him for it, but he had his own plans. Over time, he made the right connections and played the right moves, ultimately generating more revenue for the left than most of its global operatives. The left was a deeply secretive organization, headquartered inconspicuously in Ottawa. It had existed for over a century, created and funded by the elusive Salazar, the man who single-handedly imposed order on North America's criminal underworld. His word had been law. and even in his supposed absence his influence remained unchallenged. Those who defied his rules faced swift and brutal consequences. Anyone involved in Ottawa's underworld knew the legend of Salazar. His name commanded fear and respect. Even after years of being presumed dead, his system of order persisted. Those who ignored it found themselves stripped of power, erased, or worse, their entire bloodlines wiped out. The left continued to act as Salazar's hand of justice, ensuring that his laws were upheld. Vincent had been trained by the left in warfare and numerous other disciplines, while his classmates scattered across the world to serve the organization's broader interests. He chose to remain in Ottawa. When he wasn't overseeing the activities of his trusted allies, Matthew, Rajesh, and Igor, he was at the mansion, tending to his gardens or mentoring the next generation of distinguished bloodlines. Despite his criminal ties, he considered himself a family man. He had deliberately ensured that his wife and children lived far from his affairs, settling them in Vancouver, where he visited them every 2 weeks. As Vincent parked in front of the mansion, the grand gates slowly closed behind him. He passed through the gray pillars and entered through the main doors. His students weren't in the usual classroom, as he wasn't scheduled to teach that afternoon. Currently, Vincent had 3 students, each in their early teens, eager to prove their skills. The first was Celine Petra, 13, of Egyptian descent, and a direct descendant of Cleopatra and Julius Caesar. She was the unofficial leader of the group, gentle and soft-spoken on the surface, though it was all an act. Then there was Ogod Khan, 12, of Mongolian descent, rumored to be a direct descendant of Genghis Khan. While the claim wasn't particularly impressive, given the conqueror's vast genetic legacy, Ogode had a powerful sponsor, who positioned him as the true heir. Despite his small stature and innocent features, he exhibited a brutal nature, often leaving mutilated animal corpses in his wake. At the left, such tendencies weren't punished. They were studied and honed. The third student was 10-year-old Nancy Mussolini. Despite her infamous last name, Vincent found her to be the most emotionally balanced of the 3. Unlike the others, she had little taste for violence, though she had no qualms about wielding it when necessary. She was also the only one who shared Vincent's passion for gardening. As Vincent walked toward the master's office, he heard the voices of his students inside. The door swung open, revealing Celine, who stepped aside to let him in. "Hello, Mr. Vinny." "Welcome back," she greeted. "Hello, Vincent." "Hello, Uncle Vinny," Ogode and Nancy chimed in respectively. "Where's the master?" "I need to speak with him," Vincent asked, ruffling Celine's hair and hugging Nancy. "He left about an hour ago," Celine replied with a playful wink. "But don't worry, Mr. Vinny, we've got your back tonight." Vincent raised an eyebrow. "What exactly did he tell you?" Celine, Ogode, and Nancy stood in a straight line. Celine spoke first. "Master Yen said you'd need us for an assignment tonight." Ogode stepped forward. "We're using shock and awe to eliminate Igor the pig farmer and his 3 goons." Vincent smirked. "That's great! And how do you plan on doing it?" Ogode pulled out his phone and handed it over. "We scouted the farm with my drone. Igor and his men are preparing to leave soon. Instead of waiting for them here, we propose taking them out on their turf." Vincent watched the footage, impressed. Risky, but impressive. "What's your plan?" "Shock and awe," Celine repeated. "Ogode and Nancy will hide in the van. I'll take the trunk of the Rover. We strike before they even leave the farm." Vincent leaned back, considering. "Fine. But one change. I want Igor alive." The students glanced at each other but didn't argue. It was a victory. Nancy felt relieved that Vincent's home wouldn't be sullied by Igor's presence. Ogode was thrilled at the thought of feeding 3 bodies to the pigs, and Celine relished the chance to lead her first real mission. A few hours later on the pig farm, Igor and 3 of his henchmen emerged from the barn, all clad in black. However, Igor stood apart, dressed in a sleek black suit, black shirt, black tie, and polished shoes. A visual embodiment of sophisticated menace. Igor took the front passenger seat of the rover, while one of his goons slid into the driver's seat. Just as Celine had anticipated, the other 2 henchmen entered the van. The stage was set. Their weapons were concealed in the usual nooks and crannies used when navigating the streets of Ottawa. While still in the barn, Igor had called Vincent to arrange their meeting. Vincent, as smooth and detached as ever, assured Igor he would be waiting at home, giving no indication of what lay ahead. Celine, Ogode, and Nancy were already in position, Celine and Ogode behind the van, and Nancy in the trunk of the rover. Dressed in dark camouflage onesies, each carried a short katana. They sat in silence, awaiting the signal. The weight of the moment pressed upon them. This mission would validate their rigorous technical and emotional training. Celine had emphasized that the operation must commence as soon as the vehicle's engines were turned on. Speed and precision were crucial to eliminate resistance and minimize risk. Igor settled into his seat and gave his driver a nod. As soon as the engine roared to life, Celine listened for the van's ignition. The instant she heard it, she sprang into action, stretching her left hand to the rover's steering wheel. She launched her sheathed katana with her right hand, catching it mid-air. In one fluid motion, she drove the blade into the driver's chest. Smiling, she twisted it viciously to the right, then back to the left before yanking it free, producing a sickening grind against his ribs. With feline agility, she vaulted from the trunk to the back seat, moving with the grace of a well-trained predator. Igor froze for a brief second, stunned by her swift brutality. As his senses returned, instead of attacking, he instinctively reached beneath his seat for his gun. But before he could grasp it, Celine pressed the katana against his throat and slid behind his seat, maintaining steady pressure on his neck as she waited. Meanwhile, Ogode and Nancy initiated their assault the moment the van's engine started. Eager for his moment, Ogode was the first to strike. He pressed his blade against the driver's neck and with one decisive motion, slashed. The cut was deep, nearly severing the head, but the spine resisted. As he struggled to finish the job, he noticed Nancy's target thrashing in the back seat, attempting to free himself from the blade protruding through his torso. Recognizing the urgency, Ogode abandoned his attempt to decapitate his victim and instead drove his sword through the struggling goon's left eye, plunging it deep into his skull until he heard a dull, unmistakable crack. Satisfied, he turned back to his own target, completed the beheading, and then swung open the van's side door for himself and Nancy. Almost simultaneously, the rover's front passenger door burst open. Igor tumbled onto the ground, dazed and sluggish. Celine followed, now wielding Igor's own gun, keeping it aimed at him. Igor was too stunned to feel anger, too disoriented to react. The sight of Celine's unwavering smile made it impossible for him to grasp the gravity of his predicament. There he knelt, motionless, his mind scrambled, staring down the barrel of his own weapon, held by a girl who grinned as though his life was meaningless. He considered lunging at her, but she was perfectly positioned, just beyond his reach. With that realization, he muttered a silent prayer and awaited his fate. As Igor resigned himself, Ogode and Nancy emerged from behind the van and stood beside Celine. Ogode's hands were drenched in blood, his katana gripped in his left hand, and the severed head of his victim in his right. Nancy, on the other hand, had completed her task without a single drop of blood staining her. Igor's gaze darted between the lifeless head and the young assassins. He was horrified by the ease with which they carried out such carnage. What unnerved him even more was their silence. They merely stared at him. Celine with a chilling smile, Ogode with a look of grim satisfaction, and Nancy with a glare of pure disgust. It was Nancy's expression that unsettled him most. Being the youngest, her quiet contempt felt the most sinister. Suddenly, Igor felt two firm hands grip his shoulders from behind. He trembled as Vincent's voice filled his ears. "This is your warning, Igor. Next time you even think about moving against me, you'll be treated with even less dignity than that." Vincent turned Igor's head toward Ogode, who casually tossed the severed head into the air before stomping it into the ground with his still-growing foot. Igor, for the first time, felt something he never had before: fear. "Now," Vincent continued, "I want this place cleaned up. You'll work with Ogode, and I expect to see your full contribution at my doorstep in 4 hours." With that, Vincent gave Igor 2 light taps on the shoulder before turning away. Celine and Nancy followed. As Nancy passed Igor, she leaned in close to his ear and whispered, "It was nice meeting you, sir." A cold shiver ran down Igor's spine. He loathed her. Whoever these children were, he was convinced she was the worst of them all. The Kings continue to operate in total anonymity in the City of Ottawa, amassing wealth by the hour while enforcing order. Under Salazar's rule, their primary duty remains to maintain the city's peace. And they all knew he was watching. Hope you enjoyed this short story from the Unseen City. Salazar's Touch Volume 1. I took great pleasure in writing these stories, and though riddled in fiction and creativity, I owe the city Ottawa for its inspiration and its disposition.